5 o'clock, and if you want to start on time, since we've got a pretty unique situation to discuss tonight, in the sense that the City Executive Board set out some time ago a strategy for the development of a new pool and the disposal of the Temple Cowley pools, and we're now at the stage of deciding on the disposal of the site. But because of the community right to bid, there was a 6-month period of moratorium in which the community interest group put together a proposal, and so we'll be considering first of all tonight the commercial bids, taking the views of officers and members on the optimal one of those bids, and then comparing it with the CIC proposal, which is not a bid in the conventional sense. It's not aligned with the criteria that were set out in the bid documentation, but needs to be judged against different criteria, that is the general policy positions of the council, and they are set out in the papers. So what I'm proposing to do in terms of procedure is that we will have first of all a presentation of the commercial bids from Jane Winfield, Head of Asset Management, and questions and answers to Jane about that. Then we'll move on to the presentation from Nigel Gibson and colleagues from the CIC, and then we will have questions and answers over that presentation, and then we'll have a discussion more generally, and in that process 3 members of council have asked to speak, who are not members of the board, Sam Hollick, Dick Wolfe and Craig Simmons, and I'll bring them in at that particular juncture. And then we'll finish with Ed Turner, who is the portfolio holder for this area, to sum up and make a recommendation on the preferred way forward. Hope that's clear. So let's start then with Jane, you presenting the commercial bids and the recommendations for the acceptance of one or more of those bids. Before that, there is apology stamp. Do you have any?
Oh, it's
Peter Spillman, Chief Executive, is not able to be here. I should also say we have a bundle of questions from the public and officers' responses which are on the table, and for information they're there and they will be in the record.
Thank you. In respect of the commercial bids, we started marketing the site at the beginning of the year. This was a fully open marketing process. We had interest from both national and local house builders and other parties. We had some parties that looked at the scheme for purely housing, and some also looked at it for care homes. For care homes, and that was pure care home. We had 50 original expressions of interest, which resulted in 9 very competitive bids. You'll realise that when you've got 50 people looking at this, at the end of the day, people are bidding in a really competitive bidding scenario. So, we can be confident that in terms of value, the marketing process has gone well. We asked various evaluation questions of a number of the bids, and we managed to get ourselves to a position where we had 3 preferred bidders. We'd evaluated, we were confident that we understood the content and the makeup of those offers, and finally we have come to a position whereby our recommended bidder is Catalyst. Now, the way that we've come to that recommendation was not based on price alone. We were conscious that we wanted a scheme that was deliverable, where we could drive quality of design and quality of materials. So as part of the proposals, the bidders had to give us a feel for how many residential units they could get on the site, what the scheme might look like, and we evaluated on the basis of 70% on price and 30% on quality. Catalyst scored extremely well on both bases, and I'm happy that we can recommend them as the preferred of the commercial bidders.
Thanks very much, Jane. I think it'd be useful if you could just expand a bit on Catalyst, who they are and what they represent in terms of housing offer.
If I might do, Chairman. Catalyst are a registered provider who operate throughout the South East. They've got a good reputation in Oxford, having done at least one scheme that we're aware of and delivered recently. And they are one of the larger RPs in the country.
I have interrogated the housing team. They have a close working relationship with Catalyst and are happy to go with that recommendation.
Thanks.
Hi,
thanks. Just a couple of questions on that, really. One is about the nature of the affordable housing, what sort of affordable housing it would be. That's obviously something people are interested in. Is we're talking social rent, shared ownership. At the moment, our local plan anticipates 50% affordable, of which 80% social rent, 20% can be other affordable tenures like shared ownership. And it would be helpful to hear about that. Secondly, I think there's been some representations made to us about sort of density of development. And I'm just playing this through in my mind. If, obviously, there'll be a set planning process if Catalyst were the successful bidder. And could you just say a little bit more about how that would work?
I should say that we're not asking CEB to act as a planning committee here. If I turn to the matter of the density, first of all, I think that there is some confusion in respect of, in the sites and housing plan, there is a lower figure than 47 is allocated to this site in particular. In calculating the overall number of dwellings that can be provided across the city, which was the purpose of the sites and housing plan, a generic density of 55 units per hectare was used, and that was across the city. It wouldn't have mattered if this was a very low density housing scheme or a flatted scheme. The overall numbers were based on 55. Clearly this site is able to support an element of flatted as well as residential, and therefore planning colleagues are content that the density that we're talking about in the Catalyst bid is correct and deliverable. Insofar as the affordable housing is concerned, Catalysts have confirmed that it is 50% affordable in the round, of which the split is 80-20 as you suggested.
Could I ask about the provision of car parking spaces? I appreciate that we're not a planning committee, but this will be of interest to people.
The initial plans from Catalyst show a number of car parking spaces which total 53.
Any other questions about the recommendation in relation to the commercial bits? Mike?
Thanks, Bob. Again, I appreciate we're not a planning committee, but we do want to accept a bid that might not be attainable. Has any assessment been made of the height that would be required of the building and any potential impact on neighbouring residential amenity?
In respect of the top 6 bids, what we did as part of the process was to take plans and designs as we had to the local planning authority for confirmation from them that we weren't going to accept a proposal that just was so far away from policy that it wouldn't be deliverable.
Okay, if there are no more questions, then can we note that the recommendation from the officers is that the Catalyst bid should be accepted, park that for the time being, and we'll come back to that in summing up and decision making at the end. And move on to the next phase, which is Nigel, your presentation.
Thank you, Bob.
Evening, everybody. My name is Nigel Gibson. I'm the Director of the CEB20141210 Community Interest Company. We've got a short presentation for you which goes through, we think, the key aspects of the bid. Happy to answer questions about anything not shown there. I'm joined this evening on the table by a couple of my colleagues from the members of the CEB20141210 CIC, Judith Harley and Sue Bruff. There are various other people around the room as well who may want to answer depending on questions. The agenda I've shown up there. We're going to just run through key elements, look at the timeline, what new facilities exactly we're proposing, and then talk a bit around the sort of value that's being brought to the community through this proposal, specifically talking a bit about the health provision, look at the facilities needed in Cowley, and then a way of measuring community value, which I don't think is something that was part of the evaluation criteria, but I think is something very important in terms of evaluating bids if you're trying to get an equivalent cash value. And then I'll summarise on the benefits. So in terms of the key elements, I'll just put them up and then run through them. We're looking on this as a community asset transfer. This may have not been clear in the original proposal, but we did clarify them. Sorry, let's go back again. We looked at the way in which we could do this as to whether we should look at buying the site. And in evaluating that, firstly, we weren't quite sure how much you might want for it. And secondly, we felt that with not knowing what the value was, we couldn't very well go out to the community. We also evaluated, for the money, we also evaluated the risk involved in this. And we felt if you as a council retained ownership of the site, then that was much less risk for yourselves. In the case that we weren't successful, then you could take it back. If you sold it to us and we weren't successful, we might well sell it on ourselves. So we just felt this was a better way of doing things. A principle of the way we're going to operate is to keep it continuously operating. Not only through the transfer from yourselves to ourselves, but also through the build as well. This is something that's happened in other places. We're looking at what we consider a prudent and phased development programme. So not doing all the building work at once, but first off demonstrating that it's viable and we can operate the centre successfully for what it's there for, which is to operate health and fitness facilities. There's a financially viable business plan. I think you've all been sent the version of the proposal which has got a 5-year plan in it, which has been developed with one of our potential partners, Active Nation. We also just didn't want it to be just another leisure centre. We thought there's more to it than that in a way of energising and focusing for the community. Part of this is around integrating more with the NHS. It became a sort of natural consequence. We felt that if we're promoting health and exercise, or exercise and fitness, we should promote health as well. And there's this concept of social prescribing coming on board now, which I'm sure you're well aware of. And we felt by integrating with that would be a benefit to the community. Allied to that is, again, providing a focus around community. We're offering a very large community space in there, partly to replace some of the community areas that have been lost around there, but also just to provide a place for people to have this focus and do more exercise. So combined with the community space, we've got exercise studio and also therapy rooms. Project itself enabled through professional partners. We've had discussions with all sorts of people who've actually worked at the pools and know about it, leisure operators in different places, community groups up and down the country have taken over places similar to Temple Cowley pools, as well as leisure operators themselves, such as Active Nation, and also various housing associations about the potential for working with them. In essence, it's been developed with the community, for the community. We feel that's very, very important, and it's backed up by the massive public support to keep Temple Cowley pools open that you're no doubt well aware of from the various emails that have been coming your way over the last couple of weeks. We also provided in the appendix, one of the appendices, I don't think it's been made available to the CEB, a large number of letters of support for this particular proposal. Now, looking at the timeline, we've split this into 3 phases. As I said before, there's a period during which we'd want to take it over. As community asset transfer, there's a potential TP liability there, as well as doing a due diligence. So we see, for example, if you were to take from December to March as just a suggested timeline, during this interim period we'd be doing due diligence to check that our assumptions are all correct, but also looking at the TUPE implications in terms of taking things over and taking over any staff so that we can get ready for it. The second phase is demonstrating that we can actually operate the centre. We transition into a BENCOM potentially that's it's a society formation that enables us to have charitable tax status, so we can make maximum benefit from any income that we have. There'd be a modest improvement programme, such as bringing the diving pool back into use, refitting the gym, fixing the air conditioning that hasn't been working for several years as well. Also improvements to energy efficiency. So putting the pool covers in for an investment of £25,000 to save £25,000 a year, and other things like power matching. All of these are described in the proposal in more detail. Having demonstrated that, we're then looking at the main build proposal, where we go and do some detailed design and get planning permission and start the build and then start to operate. And I'll describe that in more detail in a minute. So just having a look at the various facilities that we've got there. This is on the ground floor. The outline red there is the actual site plan, which you've no doubt seen. That's the library there, that's Temple Road going up and down there. So generally people come in that way to go into the centre. The rebuild would be over the same footprint as there is now, pretty much, shown there, retaining the pool area that's there, and enhancing the system there. The first feature there is the cafe, that's the yellow part there. That will be open to the general public, not just visitors to the centre, and we see that as a way of providing a dropping off point or a meeting point for parents picking up children, or in between the library and going into the leisure centre. One of the features of Temple Cowley pools are the changing rooms, which are single sex with some disabled changing and family changing. We would retain those there. There's one shown there and another one shown over there, as well as introducing a more mixed style for changing, and also separate changing areas for disabled and families, more than there is at the moment. Also at the moment there's a sauna and steam suite, which is located around about here. We'd move that to inside the centre because it's just more energy efficient. Just also mention in passing that part of the development in the pools will bring the diving pool back into use, put a jacuzzi in there, and at the moment we're talking about a slide. We believe it's possible that a flume in there as well. The red areas are some of the residential housing that we've put in there, shown there. They're over 3 floors, they're shown in red on the pictures. This is the first floor that's being shown there. Sorry, no, that's the ground floor, it's in detail, sorry. I'll just go on to the first floor. That space there is 190 square metres of community space with catering facilities. Allied to that is an exercise studio which is divisible, so there's a very large space for any sort of community facilities that need and want to take place there. A redeveloped gym, where we'd seek to reuse the facilities that we've redeveloped as part of just taking it over initially, and some treatment rooms there, various things, with more housing you see around there. And as we go up a couple more floors, there's more housing as we go up. I haven't shown that, but it is shown in the proposal. In terms of delivering community value, exercise and fitness is obviously a key feature of it, but there's also other areas as well: community, health, social housing. All of these facilities are needed in Cowley. In terms of the fitness facilities, current footfall is said to be about 148,000. I know there's some other figures that have been shown in the questions and answers session, but we are aware from previous years that it has gone up to between 300 and 350,000 footfall. So we know that's achievable. And when we looked at that and played it into our business plan, then we think that's sustainable as well in terms of where it could get to, in terms of the figures that we're looking at. A key point here is that this is not a zero sum. So it's not that if you've got a new pool at Blackbird Leys and we have one here operating still, that we're going to compete for facilities and for users. There's a huge number of people in the community that don't actually take part in exercise at the moment. And having more community facilities closer to them is incredibly important to help meet the objectives of central government and indeed all councils, I believe, in terms of getting people fitter in terms of what they want to do. So we believe the facilities will complement other leisure facilities. The community aspect I've mentioned before. In terms of health, we're looking at putting together a community health hub, talk to a number of independent professionals, so similar to what's going over in the west of the city, where you've got the Oxford Community Health Hub, we'd look to be setting up the Temple Cowley Community Health Hub as well. In terms of the housing, we're looking at social housing, operating with a housing association, who'd also look after the remainder of the flats. So 17 to 20 being built, half of those will be social housing, and that fits within what we believe to be the mandated 25 or 26 maximum from the planning policies. All of these, as I say, are needed inside Cowley. In terms of integrated health provision, just to touch on that for a moment. I mentioned the Community Health Hub. This provides links with the NHS, not just the standard NHS provision that can be prescribed there, but also a whole spectrum of services. And the list there is sort of typically the sort of things that you'd expect to see, not just physiotherapy or acupuncture, but a whole range of things that are listed down there. The social return on investment, the Appendix E that you've been supplied with goes into great detail. A piece of research done by one of the professionals who supported us in this as part of our campaign. Examines the cost of this, the social return that you get, and the effect of removing, in fact, a leisure centre from an area, which I'll come on to later. And this effect is shown here. If you close a centre, and I don't think this is something that's ever really been addressed in the whole of 5-6 years of the campaign, you get fewer people taking exercise, which is what you'd expect. There's a 15-minute barrier. If people have to travel for more than 15 minutes to get to their place of exercise, they don't go as frequently, or they just don't go at all. It results in an increase in obesity, related diseases, lack of fitness, and so on. It also results in an increase in crime. As an example, I was given recently of over in Littlemore, where you've got some play facilities put in, where you've actually seen a drop in crime rate as a result of those facilities going in. This would have the obvious effect. Your council policy is for most people to walk or cycle to get to their place of exercise. We're aware from the survey we did a couple of years ago that 70% of people going to Temple Cowley pools walk or cycle. That will be lost if they have to go elsewhere, because they're not going to be able to walk to any other leisure centre, and cycling for most people is a bit of a stretch to get anywhere there as well. Also, you need to cater for the minority groups. A lot of people have got limited mobility, such as disabled people, people recovering from illness and being rehabilitated. They keep telling us that they want something so close so they can actually get to it, and this is true of many community centres like this, where people can get there very, very quickly and easily. Housing has to be of the right sort and of the right density in the right place to be of value to a community. And overall, the community well-being needs to increase. Measuring community value. This is an aspect we've come across recently. I've been struggling with an idea as to how do we equate for you what we're offering here with a cash value. There's a concept called the well-being valuation approach, which you may have heard of. It's contained within the Public Services Social Value Act 2012, which requires those commissioning or procuring public services contracts to consider how the work can improve the well-being of the area. The way we've calculated it is using a methodology that's been approved by the Treasury for inclusion in Green Book appraisals. So it's a standard methodology, it's acknowledged by government as something that can be used to provide this sort of comparison. It uses consistent and robust values, and there's a very large data set included in it. So they're very sure of the the value of this. What you do is you look at the social impact of something, and it calculates a value based on what happens when you raise the perception within the community of various things. There's a list of just some of the many activities listed there, so housing, health, exercise, community facilities and so on. In working it through, very conservatively, we made an assumption that perhaps 6,000 people might make use of just the centre itself for health and exercise, for exercise and fitness during the year. If they did that, and our calculation shows that it would deliver about £20 million of social value annually for those 6,000 people. Now that's excluding the use for community and for health as well. We haven't actually done that exercise yet, but we could certainly do that. And that feeds into our financial offer. As a community asset transfer, we believe this mitigates the risk for yourselves. It's at a nominal rent, and the lease period would be to match the level of confidence you want to put in it. Various councils have taken different approaches to this up and down the country. Some have offered a 125-year lease, which we're suggesting in the end. Others have started with a 3 or 5 year lease just for us to demonstrate what we're doing. And that's perhaps the approach that we'd have discussions with yourselves about, if that's what you wanted. We've supplied a 5-year business case demonstrating financial viability. As a not-for-profit operation, any surplus will be returned to the council. We estimate that at the moment to be approximately, based on our figures, about 50,000 a year. That may go up or down depending on how we drive the footfall and the various activities that we do there. The phased implementation de-risks while it validates what's going on, and in essence is zero financial risk to the council. If we're successful, then everyone's happy about what's happened. If we're not successful, then you can take it back and sell it as you're doing now. As you've demonstrated, there's keen interest in the site, so there should be no issue whatsoever in being able to dispose of it at, no doubt, a much higher value than it's rated at now. If there's an immediate financial return required, we didn't believe there is, whether it's to pay off the new pool or something like that, please then tell us what's needed and then give the community the opportunity to deliver that. And as we said, the community value conservatively calculated at £20 million a year on that. So finally then, we believe the proposal we're putting before you benefits not just the community but the council as well. We'd like the council to recognise that we can work together and come up with a proposal and a solution that will suit both what your aspirations are and also the communities living in and around East Oxford and particularly around Cowley. There's zero financial risk, as we've said. It's going to increase your reputation for actively encouraging communities and social enterprises, just enabling us to be more self-sufficient and self-sustaining. You'll fulfil your responsibility around community health, leisure and value for money, and you're ensuring equity and social justice for the communities surrounding Temple Cowley swimming pool. There'll be savings through crime prevention and reduced public health needs as well, and the community ownership will drive community inclusion and a self-sustaining momentum. All in all, we're offering a vibrant focus which is going to revitalise and energise the Temple Cowley area, complementing regeneration in nearby communities such as Rosehill and Blackford Leys. So that's it in summary.
Thank you, Nigel. Obviously, a lot of work's gone into that. Key issue which we need to test, if we can ask you a few questions about that, is the question of the viability and realism of taking your approach compared with the certainty of the capital value that we are offered by commercial bidders. The first question I have got really relates to this question of the initial period, because the staff from the fusion will be moving across to the new pool anyway, so there's no issue about TP transfer, but there clearly is an issue about handling that transitional period and also about the construction costs. So it'd be interesting to know what your working capital assumptions are for that process of taking over the pool and doing the significant works that you mentioned in phase one.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. The inclusion of the potential TUPE is just simply because it was a potential. We weren't quite sure at what point you were going to close or propose closing Temple Cowley pools. There was no information about that, so we had to make an assumption that it might be an operating concern. So that was included there. Just if you're saying that there won't be anything, then that's something that we can exclude from the proposal. In terms of taking it over, again, talking to community groups up and down the country, there's a variety of methods employed. If you heard on the radio this morning, there's a gentleman from Cricklade who'd taken over a community pool about 7 years ago. They were given 2 weeks' notice, and there was nothing actually in there. All the equipment inside was taken out when they took over. So they started from nothing. The very base that we could start for would be a group of volunteers just moving in and actually making it operational. We generated a list of volunteers with various qualifications, including things like lifeguard qualifications, that could actually come in and start to take it over. The key to operating anything like this is making sure that operationally the revenue coming in actually exceeds the costs, so it's actually profitable, and we don't need subsidies from anywhere, and that's the intention. If we were to take it over and just put some minimal improvements in place, we can see that potentially up to £200,000 would be needed to do that. Again, I think I've described that in the proposal. And that would be really to take over and start the minimal operations around bringing diving pool back into use, putting air conditioning in there, and then also refurbishing the gym. We know that that would immediately drive the footfall. The usage at the moment of the centre is very high, despite the dilapidated nature of it. And we have a group of volunteers ready, willing and able to take that over.
The point I was getting at there was about working capital there, because clearly if you're going to do construction on the scale you're talking about in terms of the new facilities, particularly something like the diving pool, then you need significant capital investment to achieve that.
The figures we have for the diving pool is that to bring it back into use, the maximum cost would be about £35,000. We feel that will fit within the 200,000.
The other significant area of interest was concerns the way in which the overall pattern of management would proceed. You mentioned in your submission the relationship with Active Nation. Be interested to know a bit more about your relationship with Active Nation and whether they are going to be partners in this process and what their role in that involvement would actually be.
Thank you, yes. So Active Nation have been involved with us for several months, talking to us about the viability of the pool. They started off by giving some general advice, but the indications are that their strategic focus is on working with communities, and they've expressed an interest in working with us further on this to take it forward. It's not depending on the state in which we take it over, they may or may not come in to partner with us straight away. It would just depend on what the state was as we take it over. So in essence, we'd rely on yourself to say, okay, this is how we transition. Can we work out the best way to transition it on behalf of the community? And then we'd work out exactly how we move it from one state into the operating state, which I'm talking about as a sort of phase 2, which is when we'd expect someone like Active Nation to be involved with us as a partner.
So currently there's no formal agreement with them, they're simply acting as advisors and professional supporters effectively.
Yes, that's right.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I've got a number of questions as well. I'd be interested when then, if we were to make a community transfer to your organisation, when you would be in a position to take over the running of the pools, how you would pay the costs of the pools. I mean, even if it was all run by volunteers, the utility costs on that building are enormous, and the carbon footprint is 15% of the City Council's total carbon footprint. I mean, it leaks like a sieve. So it's not a cheap building just even to keep open. And I'm wondering how you would meet those costs, and when you would see yourselves breaking even once you've taken possession of the building.
It's difficult to say exactly when we'd break even because we're not quite sure exactly the state at which we're going to take it over, but we plan to make it breaking even as soon as possible. What's demonstrated in the business plan is that once it's in steady operation, we can do that. There's an interregnum where we've assumed that if you were to carry on operating it at the loss that you've been stating, which is shown in there, that we could actually cover that cost for a period. In terms of your challenge around the energy, I think this is something that we've had a to and fro with over the years. The utility costs, as I understand it from your figures, are about 150,000 a year. The income on 142,000 footfall is way above that, as it is way above the £85,000 maintenance cost. So the major cost that you get in any enterprise like this is around staffing, as again the gentleman from Clicklade made the point this morning. So we would seek to map the staffing costs to within the revenue. And I don't accept your statement about it being energy inefficient. As you know, the DEC figures have shown in the past that it's been the most energy efficient emissions per square metre of any of your wet and dry leisure centres.
I disagree on that, Nigel, but that's been a point of contention for some time. Ed?
Thanks. I've got a few points. Sorry, just a couple of things to come out of the presentation. And one was just on the housing, because I've read slightly different things from the way I understood the presentation slide. What's the balance between market housing, social rent, any other sort of affordable housing that you foresee on the site? It'd probably help you if we go through them one by one. Sorry, yeah.
It's all right. Just about working, okay. Yes, if it wasn't clear from there, we're looking at, as I say, conservative 17, 20, possibly a few more depending on when we do the detailed design. Total flats, balanced according to the planning requirements. We have met with the planning team who provided with some advice about the massing, which you see up there in terms of the scale, which is why we've developed it in the way that we have. And we'd be looking at 50% social housing.
Thank you. The second one was just following up Bob's questions about the way it would run and potential partnership with a leisure operator going into your second phase. And it comes into that question about what happens with the usage, because clearly there are some ambitious targets in terms of raising the usage which are in here. Who would bear the risk if those weren't met, or indeed if running costs were higher? Would you be looking as a CIC to transfer the risk to an operator with a longer term contract, or would you be looking to sort of retain that within the CIC? What sort of contractual arrangement would you see with a third party going forward?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. As I say, we'd be seeking to operate inside the envelope of revenue, so we'd be looking to drive the usage up. Following a model that's been used at places like Bramley up in Leeds or Jesmond up in, and there are other places like Plasmaddock and so on that have done this. You operate inside what you can do, so the transfer to the partner would be when we think it's at a sensible commercial level for them. They are confident about the numbers that are involved in that, given the size and the siting of the centre in terms of what they can do. How we split that in terms of risk would be yet to be determined, because that's not something we got into detailed discussions about. What I don't expect is that we would go in there, set up a contract where we're paying them loads of money and we're not getting any income, because that's not fair on anybody. The sort of sliding scale that you could look at would be a group of volunteers taking over, like a Cricklade. You could then bring in, once we're comfortable with that, so bring in a manager for full time to actually then operate that, which is what Cricklade then tried to do. They then found that actually it was better to have someone from the community operating, which is what they're now doing. So they're operating a very small scale. I think what we'd like to do with the pool is make the most of it for the whole community. So it's not just about a centre, but also about other aspects as well. So we'd be looking to maximise the benefit we can get from that.
Thank you. And I got just a couple of questions, if I may, on the costs of refurbishment. And I think it would be fair to say that there have been differences between your estimate of costs and what the council's previous estimates have been. And I think we all know that surveyors can come up with wildly different things when they look at any building, so I understand that. If it turned out that the council's figures were correct, or result was closer to council's figures, how would you cope with that disparity?
I think that probably depends on the size of the disparity to a certain extent. But we've got a due diligence period built in there where we do more intensive surveys. We've had a structural engineer go around there. We've taken note of the independent surveys that you commissioned back in 2008, which also said there's fundamentally nothing wrong with it. The key thing to operating a centre like that, and again reflected up and down the country, is that the pools themselves aren't leaking. As some of the team know, we have been around and looked around with engineers and professional leisure operators a number of times in recent weeks just to double check actually what's going on in there, and no one is saying to us that this is not something that's not viable. So we're confident that it can operate as is. So we could just take it over and operate it, and it would then be okay. At the moment, you're spending about 85,000 a year on maintenance on that. We'd obviously seek to make it more energy efficient than it is now, but also to operate it with appropriate maintenance. We have been talking to some of the firms that actually maintain it at the moment about how they can move it taken forward. So there are improvements in things like the way in which you treat the water and things that could be put in relatively inexpensively to make it operate better. But there's a level of confidence that's been built up in terms of going around that there isn't anything calamitous in there, and it's not about to fall down at any time soon.
Thanks very much. Then the last one, but sort of related, was just about doing a survey prior to handover. And I think you mentioned that then you would discuss with the council whether there were any remedial works that needed to be undertaken. I mean, could you say a bit more about what expectations you've got built in on that? Because clearly we've done an estimate of a maintenance backlog, which is a significant sum, a couple of £1 million. Presumably you wouldn't be expecting us to do all of that. You're talking about, could you just say a bit about the expectations there prior to handover?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very fair question. You're very welcome to put in all the back maintenance you haven't put in over the last 10 years if you wish. I think we recognise that that's not likely to happen. What we're looking for is for it to be handed over as a going concern. So essentially, if you're going to do that, announce that intention, let's work together to make sure it is operating. Can we please keep the pumps working while things are going through, so things don't get into a more dilapidated state than they are already? So we really want to make sure that things aren't being done in closing it down. That means we then get considerable expense in terms of starting everything up again. Essentially, that's what it is. There's no intention to try and take loads of money off you just for that.
My question, Nigel, is on the housing element. Within your report, you mentioned conversations with registered providers and development partners. I wonder if you can flesh that out a little bit more for me and essentially answer whether there's any agreement already in place.
No, there's no agreement in place. During the right to bid phase, we spoke to a number of housing associations about their interest in this, and obviously they were involved in bidding at the time as well. So although some of them were prepared to give us some information, we've taken advice as well from people outside the area about generally how we would operate these sorts of things, so hence we come to the conclusions we have. We've got no formal partnership with any housing association at the moment on the basis that, well, one, they were involved in the other bid, so it was difficult to get into any sort of detailed commercial discussions with them. And secondly, we're looking at something now with the phasing that's 18 months, 2 years away. We would seek, once we make sure that it's operable profitably, then that's something that we can then look at that as the second phase, rather than actually trying to go ahead now and try and partner with somebody immediately.
Bob, if I may. Secondly, on the plans you've got flats over the top of part of the building, not over the swimming pool, but part of the leisure centre building. Just concerned around what that could mean in terms of insurance, in terms of the costs of building those flats, in terms of ownership of those individual homes and the agreement you'd have there, and whether you'd thought that through.
I think the approach we've taken is to make it as separate as possible, so that they are seen as distinct separate units. And we would then have the housing association actually operating the whole area, so on our behalf, rather than just operating half and half. because there's obviously contractual divisions once you get into that.
I think Scott's question, Nigel, was much more about the issue of sailing over in terms of the issues about ownership of the site, and then also the question of the construction of that facility, in that it does involve significant piling, obviously, of the housing unit, and the implications that has for the operation of the centre.
Okay. I was going to hand over to Dan Waterworth, who's the architect who's been working with us on this scheme, just to address part of that.
There's a lot of investigation still to be done. We've only had a basic plan of the existing building to date. We've been working from that to produce these plans. It's not uncommon to have flats over shops, over other commercial enterprises other than domestic. So we can separate structurally between the gym and the houses. I can't see that being a problem. And there's insurances in place. You can get insurances for that. The actual construction of the main building, there's quite a lot to work out, and like I said, it's early stages, and what we put on there at the moment is fairly conservative, and once we've got more detail, then we can beef that out again, and hopefully we can make it more detailed for you to look at.
Did I see your hand?
Yeah, can I also just emphasise again the risk aspect of this? I mean, the first stage is to make sure that we can demonstrate we can operate the centre at a profit. If we can't do that, then we can't do anything else. We won't seek to do anything else. So it's going to be measured, it's going to be phased, and it's going to be as low risk as possible.
Yeah, my question's around the initial arrangements in terms of staffing, and I'm still a little bit confused about the TUPE arrangement. I think, just to be clear, the staff that are at Temple County Pool now will be TUPE'd across to the new pool. Is that correct, Chair?
TUPE, because they're currently working for Fusion, they'll simply work for Fusion at the new pool.
Right, okay. So TUPE would only be involved if it were a new employer, i.e. you. So you were talking about the existing staff moving into your organisation to work, but then you also talked about volunteers. I'm not sure the other cases that you've described where in other situations they've been able to find the right staff, but actually in Oxford it is quite difficult. It is a challenge to find well-qualified staff to run these sorts of activities. So you've talked about volunteers, so I'd like a little bit more clarity about how you would actually staff it straight away.
Okay. Well, for example, we have an experienced pool manager who's ready, willing and able to come in and start operating it with us and give us the benefit of his experience. He knows Temple Galley pools as well, so which would be very useful to start with. And yeah, we have a group of volunteers, and again I quote the example of Cricklade. They had people at 2 weeks' notice who just came and operated it. We would not operate it beyond safety, so if we don't have lifeguards, then the pool's not going to operate. But we're confident that we've got sufficient to be able to operate it. And it may be, and let's say the example of other areas is if they don't have sufficient staff, they don't operate as fully as they might want to, so it's only open for certain periods. But the whole point is to actually make it operate as and when you can.
I'm just wondering what your interpretation of sufficient would be, Nigel, please.
Sorry, can you perhaps just say a bit more?
I just wondered what you meant by sufficient staff in terms of lifeguarding.
Sorry, I don't know the detail of the lifeguarding provision that's necessary to cover a particular pool. It's not something I have. I can find it out for you if you like and come back with a plan. But as I say, at the moment, the assumption we've made is that we will be TUPEing staff over. Until we know exactly how many staff we're TUPEing over, it's difficult to say this is exactly what the balance would be between certain numbers of staff in different areas.
Just for information, my understanding is it's unlikely that any staff will be available for TUPE transfer.
That's fine, thank you. We have had that. And in fact, it's also, as far as I'm aware, not all staff are transferring over to the new pool. Over the last few weeks, we have had discussions with a number of people, and that includes lifeguards and also children and adult swim teachers as well as people who've worked in gyms. So we are confident that we can put a rota together that would provide something at least to start with, but we don't know how few or how many.
Thanks. Just maybe to help, the health and safety executive has some guidelines. The number of lifeguards is needed for particular kinds of swimming sessions and particular kinds of pools, which are available online. What I'd like to ask about is the fairly bold, what I think are fairly bold assumptions of usage on which the whole thing hangs. There are some very impressive community operations, perhaps the most impressive and the closest comparator to Temple Cowley Pool is Bramley, because it has not only a pool but also a gym and a steam room area. Even so, it was transferred in as a community asset in mint condition. It's now only open part-time, and its concessionary rate for a swim is more than twice as. Jesmond, which is referenced in the extra information, wasn't asset transferred because it was a particular burden on the council. In fact, it's one of the most commercially successful pools in the North East. It was transferred absolutely as a going concern, which without any financial problems for the new operator. So I'm wondering what these very optimistic income and usage figure projections, more than doubling of usage, are based on, given that although obviously leisure participation can always be improved and we have an ambition to do that, Oxford is already has the highest participation levels in Oxfordshire and one of the highest in England, and a lot of the fall in usage of Temple Cowley has been more than matched by the rise in usage of the other pools and facilities.
Okay, so take the example of Bramley then, which, if you go and visit, it's a delightful centre actually, about a mile away from the Leeds City Council leisure centre, and there were concerns that it might not operate fully. They are there, yes, it operates, it's open when it can be open. They are still making, I believe last year, about £35,000 profit overall, so they were able to operate it inside the revenue envelope. That's the way in which they do it. But what you do is you market the site to make more use of it. We know that Temple Cowley Pools is in a primary district centre. We know it's a transport hub. We know in the past people on the council have said it's the place where you choose to put somewhere if you're going to put somewhere at all. Because of the footfall and the way in which people use it and the way people have used it in the past and keep telling us they want to use it again. We wouldn't be pursuing this scheme if the community wasn't fully supporting what we want to do. And as you've seen over the last few weeks, hundreds of letters of support have come in simply because people want that opportunity to be able for the community to take control of what they're doing and not have the council close down something that the community wants to keep open. I can only emphasise again that it's low risk to you, because if we're unsuccessful it comes back to you and you can sell it off at a higher price. If we're successful then everybody wins.
I just wanted to take you briefly back to staffing and in particular the arrangements that you are putting in place to have volunteers running the centre for a period. What reassurances can you give us about the sort of safeguarding measures you've taken to ensure that people are being DBS checked and that they're obviously safe, therefore, to operate in that way?
Any volunteers that we have in there will have the appropriate checks in place and the appropriate training. It's only just now that I've had confirmed to me that there's no opportunity for TUPE. before we put a proper plan in place with the staffing requirements, we need to know how it's going to be handed over to us so we can work that out, and also what staff are available. So it's not that we're unaware of these things, it's just that until we know what we can do, we can't actually work to put a plan in place. The point is, at the moment we have a register of volunteers which is ever increasing, and from that we will select what we need in terms of staffing and make sure we know what the qualifications are that people have got.
No more questions. We shall move into discussion. And do you want Sam or Dick? Do you want to come first, or Craig?
I think I wasn't going to speak for too long, but I did want to try and remind ourselves a little bit of the context and the overall focus that we're looking at here. We're looking at a long-term project. This isn't about short, quick gains. It's about looking 50 years ahead at the kind of city that we want to see. And so the financial pros and cons, are put into some perspective by that 50-year lead time. We've got a dream of being a world-class city. The geographical centre, especially if the city grows in the south-eastwards direction, is going to be Cowley. That's going to be the centre of this world-class city. And with all respect to the good people of Cowley, it is not a world-class city at the moment, if you look at Cowley as being the centre of it. And what we're looking at here is the potential further hollowing out of what will become the geographical centre of our city. That's really important. And, in 40, 50 years' time, what kind of place? Once you start losing sites like this to leisure and for housing, it's going to be uncommonly difficult to get them back. So we're locking ourselves into a situation possibly for short-term financial gain, in which we might come to bitterly regret in 20, 25 years' time. As we know, it's already been said, this is sitting at the heart of a population of something like 51,000 people, an area of 7 square miles that has direct bus access to this place. This is at the heart of what is going to be the geographical heart of the city of Oxford. On the housing question, which I'm sure is an issue, all councillors are deeply concerned about the housing concern. I'm very impressed with what has been done so far. Nigel has filled us in a huge amount of information, but I think, and it's great that we've actually got as far as having a sensible conversation now about what could actually be done, and it's beginning to look as if it really could work. But there is clearly room for ongoing discussions and negotiations on the housing aspect of it. So I wouldn't want your discussions to hang themselves entirely on, we can get 2 more rooms in, or I think there's room for work on that yet. That's very clear. There's a lot of room. I think really that's all I mainly want to say, is to just remember what the context is that we're dealing with here. In terms of raising capital, we already know £250,000 has been raised by Low Carbon Hub in more than record time, and in fact it's exceeded its targets. Everywhere there's been a community share offer, it's exceeded its targets for things like solar thing. I really don't think there's any problem with this pool raising the initial capital that it needs to do it. There is a huge amount of community goodwill, and they're going to want to make it work, and I'm sure that they will.
Craig, do you want to? David, okay, yeah.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak here. Just really want to make a couple of points. For a long time, the pool's been seen as, or been portrayed as not a viable option, and the closure was really the only option. I think it's very important to recognise today that we've seen a proposal that makes the pool viable and feasible. The officers would have had the opportunity to tell you otherwise. So I think that's the first critical point. Now, to my mind, you're sort of offered here with what I would call in my business a no regrets decision. You've been discussing the questions, as far as I can tell so far, have basically been operational issues. You've been raising, rightly, the fact that this option has greater risks than cash in the bank. To me, that's not a problem. You just take control of that risk by taking this offer and giving, say, a 2 or 3 year trial period. Nigel's made it very clear that if it's not working, the property still sits with us. So, I mean, those are my initial points. Now, here, what's always worried me about this Temple Cowley Pool scheme is the fact it seems that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's always been made out that Temple Cowley Pool has to go, so Blackbird Leys and Pool can happen. That's not the case at all. You can win on both sides here. You can deliver to both communities. Temple Cowley can have its pool, and Blackbird Leys can have its pool. How often can you, I don't know how much cash the Catalyst offer actually is. I know the whole value, I don't know what the cash value is. But let's assume it's, say, 1.5, 2 million. For that amount of money, you're going to forego that amount of money to deliver.
One more minute.
Yeah, you're going to forego that amount of money to deliver an incredible community asset that is really, really required. You can't, on the one hand, argue that Temple Cowley won't lose out if it loses its pool, and at the same time argue that Blackbird Leys will benefit. People will use the facility, and people will lose the facility. So I would urge you, please, to take this proposal very seriously. Look at its risk and manage that risk in a very professional way by giving this period where you can bring the asset back in. And basically, I have to say, I didn't suspect I'd be talking to a Labour group who were going to effectively rip out a community asset. I thought that was what the Tories did. So I urge everybody here, please, to give this option its fair chance and go for it.
That's 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. So I have 3 minutes. So I'm not going to talk as a Green politician because you've heard from my colleagues and I think you know the views of the Green Group well. I'm going to talk as Chair of Scrutiny. And as Chair of Scrutiny, we haven't had the opportunity to scrutinise this proposal because of the timing and because of the nature of the forward plan and the fact it's a special meeting. And I think that's unfortunate. I think as Bob himself said, scrutiny does add value to these things. We ask questions, we give things proper deliberations. So there are a number of questions that have been raised, I think, legitimately, could be raised on both bids. And so I'd very much like the opportunity, regardless of the decision of this committee, to actually take this report to scrutiny. So we have scheduled a meeting on the 23rd of December to look at it, so there's not a huge interruption to schedules. And I think we'd like to look at a number of different items, and particularly maximisation of affordable housing on the site, so we can contribute hopefully to the planning debate when this goes forward to the planning conditions. We can look at the finances in more detail, the extent of leisure and community facilities on site. It could be anything from, with the Catalyst proposal to a community room, all the way up to a full retention of the pool. Looking at environmental standards, density and massing on the site. These are all critical things which will feed back into the decision. So regardless of the decision today, and I think it would be wrong for me to put my personal political views before my views as chair, I will be calling the decision into a scrutiny committee.
Thank you, Craig. I think that's something which, as we said before, is an important part of the process, and that's what the call-in process is about. So that has been programmed in. Right, moving on to other comments. Mike, do you want to kick off?
We are into a period of general discussion. General discussion. Let me set out briefly, and I've already asked a very detailed question and proposal, so I'm not going to comment further on that. Let me set out briefly how we have got to this point and what the council's ambition is. We want to have a world-class leisure service, and we want that to be sustainable financially and environmentally into the long-term future. In order to do that, we have come up with a plan that involves consolidation of our leisure facilities in 5 centres, the significant improvement of those centres, and a financial plan that involves the council breaking even on leisure by the financial year 2016-17. We recognise that we don't know who's going to be in government next year. We don't know who will be in administration of this council in 10, 20, 30 years' time. And we would like, and this has been my personal ambition since I became board member for leisure, to fireproof our leisure service against cuts as much as we can. I want to leave the leisure service in a position where nobody has any legitimate excuse for service reductions. To do that, we break even. We get a leisure service which has no cost to the council, which is, as I said, environmentally sustainable, which can meet not only all its own costs, but the costs of improvement, of reaching out to the community, of continuing the concessionary rate scheme, which now has 35% of our leisure members, in which we've frozen since 2009, so that everybody in this city can have access to world-class leisure. We're not there yet. The opening of the new Blackbird Leys pool is a major step, probably the last major step in enabling that to happen. To do that, certain assumptions have been made, one of which is a capital receipt, as members will be aware from the pool. Although not quite as large a capital receipt as is proposed by the officer's preferred commercial bid. One of these, another assumption is that the leisure participation within the city will gradually continue to increase, as it has been increasing for the last 5 years since the big infusion contract in 2009. It's now, as I mentioned before, the highest in Oxfordshire and among the highest in England participation in leisure and physical activity in general. And although we're confident that we can increase slowly, I have grave doubts that there is room for an increase of the kind that's more than doubling of the Temple Cowley pool that we have. Well, the evidence, I'm afraid, is the track record of the last 5 years of increases which have been unprecedented in Oxford's history, but considerably lower than that. That's why I asked what the evidence was for the confidence in such an increase, which would be absolutely necessary to keep the pool running according to the plans with which have been presented by the CIC. So without making a recommendation or commenting any further on the proposals at length, that is the background to where we are. That is what the council has been attempting to achieve, just to put the public in the picture and make some points that fellow members of the CEB may want to take into consideration.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Bobby. I've got one question for Tim Sadler, one for Nigel Kennedy, actually. Just questions. Tim, both in some of the representations I've received, and I think implicitly, one way or another in some of the discussion tonight, there's been a question about capacity of the new pool, and how many visits we'd be expecting there. Would it be able to cope when things when it starts running? And in particular, would it be able to cope if the existing Temple Cowley pool wasn't there? Equally, what would be your assessment about the amount of sort of drop-off there might be, which could be picked up by the CIC, if that makes sense?
I think an important starting point to make about this is that I don't think we're making a choice between a pool for Blackbird Leys or a pool for Temple Cowley. What we're seeking to do is replace the city's competition standard pool, which also provides a community use in its immediate area. But the primary focus of this is a citywide facility which has broader appeal across beyond the exact neighbourhood. So I don't think we're necessarily trading one set of users for another. It's the same pool of users. And I think the new...
If members of the public can't keep quiet, I shall have to ask you to leave.
You should leave.
So I think that's the context in which members should judge this. That's certainly the intention of what's been designed and built and will shortly open at the Leys, a citywide facility which offers a wide range of facilities, not least of which is a competition standard pool. That new pool will have a capacity, the whole centre will have a capacity of somewhere in the region of 350,000 plus visits per annum. We believe that the City of Oxford Swimming Club will move the bulk of their training and all of their events there. A large number of members of Temple Cowley are already taking up the offers from Fusion to transfer their membership to the new Leys facility, and sales of swim lessons are going incredibly well. So I think a lot of people will take the option to move to the new facility as they see it as a much better replacement.
It's too far.
And don't see that travel distance involved as a great burden. So I think it's going to prove a great challenge to the KIC if they were to remain running TCP, because they would be looking to an increasingly small pool of very local users who would use the facility.
Thank you. My question to Nigel Kennedy, our Head of Finance, was just about the capital receipt. I mean, obviously, the Council didn't receive the capital receipt. It could try to finance its capital programme from elsewhere. One way of doing that would be to try to source alternative receipts. Another would be to pare back the capital programme. And another would be to borrow prudentially. What, roughly speaking, would be the annual borrowing cost for prudential borrowing to fund 3.6 million, if that's the right figure to use?
Yeah, the capital receipt we'd actually assumed in the capital programme for the financing of Temple Cowley Pool, for Blackbird Leys Pool, we'd assumed about 1.5 million. If we weren't to receive that amount, that will be the loss of financing on the current capital programme. That will be in the region of about £120,000 per year that we'd have to find, because we'd prudentially borrow basically to make up the shortfall. So about £120,000 per year on the revenue account.
Chair, I think I've heard enough to make a clear decision about this. There doesn't seem to be any doubt at all about which way we should go. I think we should accept the bid from Catalyst. It would give the people of Oxford a large capital sum, 3.6 million. It would give them 47 new homes. And I think it's the sensible step. I've got every sympathy with people who remember the Temple Cowley pools in their heyday or use the Temple Cowley pools now. And I'd like to live in a world in which we all paid enough tax that we could all have district swimming pools around every corner. We don't. And what this council has to do is look at the wider Oxford interest. And that, I think, is the job of this CEB today, is to look at the wider Oxford interest as far as swimming pools and the assets of the council are concerned. We've seen a lot of delay in this whole programme. And we were hoping that the swimming pool would have been open 2 years ago. There have been all kinds of delaying tactics, and I very much regret, and I'm sure many of the supporters don't realise this, but I think this is another delaying tactic to try and keep open a pool which is lovely as it was, has now had its day. It's time we replaced it. I've had the privilege, Chair, of going to visit the new Temple Cowley pool. It is light, it is airy, it is ecological. Sorry. Well, it's everybody's pool. It's Temple Cowley's pool, it's Blackbird Leys' pool, it's North Oxford's pool. It's a pool that belongs to the whole people. It happens to be in Blackbird Leys, and I can't think of a better place for it. But what I was going to say was that it has solar panels, it's got biomass, it's got LED lighting. It's great, and I shall be the first in the queue to go and have a swim there. And I would urge everyone in the audience to fall in line behind me and get in and make the Blackbird Leys pool a great success. We've got a valuable site here. It's not a derelict site. I've not been at all convinced that the plans that the proposers have put forward have made any sense at all. I think it's very much a wing and a prayer. I think we would be foolish to go down that line, and I'd like to move that we reject the proposal from sections of the community and that we agree the catalyst bid.
John? Susan? Look, 4 years ago, we took a decision about how we wouldn't just provide swimming pool facilities this year or last year, a swimming pool facility in the south of the city in 25, 30 years' time. And we took that decision to build a new pool at Blackbird Leys, looking ahead in that way. And we took that decision because it was the most affordable option available to us at the time. Now, decent people can disagree on how we made that decision, but that decision was reached, and it's a significant capital investment that the council has made in building the new swimming pool. And and affording that was partly predicated on the receipt from the old TCP site. Next week we'll be setting forward our budget proposals for next year. It's probably one of the most difficult budgets I've been involved in on my time in the council. The council is under severe financial pressure, and to turn down a receipt like this, does come a significant risk to us for the reasons that Nigel's detailed. I think Dick said that we could still take that decision to not take that receipt, but given the risks and uncertainty around the CIC proposal, I don't think that would be the prudent thing for us to do, and I support John's proposal that we should reject the CIC bid and go with the preferred commercial provider. Susan?
Yeah, I've read through these documents very carefully, and I've listened very carefully to the answers that have been given to the questions that have been put today. And to me, there seem to be some really dangerous assumptions being made in this document about the viability of the proposal in all sorts of different directions, from the number of people who are thought to be able to be likely to use it, to the costs of running it, to the financial backing, to the proposals around housing, potential partners, and I haven't really heard anything, unfortunately. I was hoping I would. I haven't heard anything this evening that makes me think that this is a viable proposal. So I will, yes, I'm afraid I think it's very unlikely that I will be able to support that.
Thank you. Yes, I think I would concur with Susan. I have to say, personally, I'm very fond of Temple Cowley swimming pool. I learnt to swim there. I've got my 10 yards and my 25 yard certificates. But it's clearly had its day. I can understand local residents feeling as you do, and I have to say, there's a part of me that congratulates you on your campaign. I think you've done very well in the work that Nigel's been putting into this bid, but I think there are far too many assertions, far too many assumptions. I can't support it. I'm going for the preferred measure. Thank you.
Yes, I can completely understand why many people in Cowley and south of Oxford want to save this pool. I've listened to a lot of arguments. I've met personally with Nigel and Sue and had discussions with them about the proposals. And I had hoped this evening that we would get some clearer answers to some of the questions that we had. One of the things that's being said is that if we were to dispose of the pool to the CIC, that this would be at no risk to the council. I, as an individual, can't accept that because if we handed it over and it was poorly managed, it wasn't safely managed, there wasn't a robust management system in place there, then actually we would feel very responsible for that. And the real sticking point for me is the point that both Dean and Susan has referred to, is this dependence on volunteers. I mean, I've been involved in a number of voluntary organisations where we've had a small involvement of volunteers. It's a deeply time-consuming and complex business, managing and overseeing and being responsible for people that are giving up their time. I mean, there's the safeguarding issue that Susan's mentioned. There's the question of the skill sets of the volunteers. I mean, you know, it's a sophisticated business running a pool and leisure centre. It's, you know, you would need extremely skilled people, and I don't see any evidence that audit has been carried out. I don't know if you've thought about the training needs. I don't know if you've thought about the accountability of those people, how they would be managed. And for that reason, I can't support it, because I do feel that actually the risk to the council could be considerable. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to support the catalyst bid.
Okay, do you want to say that? You've got a recommendation. Mike, do you want to come back?
Now I've got two of them. I can assure the audience that I have read all of the emails fully. I hope that I've received. I hope my colleagues have as well. I'm sure we have. I've considered this document and the supplement very carefully, and the presentation that we've heard. So I'm not going to say, I'm not going to use that hypocritical phrase that I believe the politicians sometimes use, with a heavy heart, because it's not actually with a heavy heart. It's with great respect for the people who've contributed to the Temple Cowley Pools campaign, but not with regret that I support the proposal John has made. Because actually what the council is proposing to do is an improvement for the whole of the people of Oxford. Back in the late 1930s, our predecessors in this place took a bold move to open a state-of-the-art leisure facility on what was then the very edge of Oxford, where they believed that there would be increasing need and expansion of the city in that direction, with some of its poorest people gravitating to that area. They took the right decision. We are now taking what is essentially the same decision. We are going to build a state-of-the-art hub for the whole of Oxford, but in the place where it is needed. We are going to make our leisure service sustainable for the long-term future, so that not only the people who use Temple Cowley Pool, but their grandchildren can learn to swim in our new facility. So I do support the proposal that John has made.
Ed.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, a few comments sort of by way of summing up from my perspective. I mean, one point just at the start, though, to be clear, is of course a final decision won't, based on what Craig Simmons said earlier, be taken tonight. We will take a decision, it will be called in, and it will be examined by scrutiny. So whichever way you look at it, we're not going to be there yet. I mean, it seems to me what we got to weigh up on the one hand is the preferred commercial bid, and it is a bid, and that gives us the great advantage of certainty. It gives us some certainty, I think, on the housing delivery.
You won't get it through planning. It's too dense.
I'm
Yeah, okay, thanks. It gives us some certainty, I think, on the housing delivery, because I suspect a reputable registered provider will work with planning colleagues, will listen to and engage the community. Indeed, community engagement, I recall reading, was very much part of what they were seeking to do, and will come up with a scheme which is acceptable in terms of planning policies. And it is, of course, a site which is designated as being a possible housing site. In addition to that, there is a capital receipt for the council. I think if anyone, sometimes we're accused of being overly pessimistic on our council finances. Anyone who still says that after the autumn statement, when we heard about the Chancellor's plans for cuts which are bigger than those we've faced so far, and I remind people we've lost just about half of our government grants since 2010. A post-autumn statement has every reason to be very pessimistic, and so £3.6 million is not small beer. That is something which is going to be really, really important in safeguarding many of the ambitions, not just in leisure, but frankly elsewhere, things that we really value doing, things like grants to voluntary organisations, things like preventing homelessness, things like keeping the full council tax benefit scheme in place, things which we're doing, things which other councils have hacked away at, and things which frankly post-autumn statement can be very difficult to do unless we're extremely cautious financially. And then lastly, we will get more of the social housing, and I think I stand by that. I think that's a good thing. I know sometimes people say that they're not so keen on housing, or they don't want to see as much of it, but really from where I am, it's absolutely essential. On the other hand, we have in front of us a proposal, not a bid. I think it has been as well worked up as can be in the circumstances. It's clear a lot of work and thought has gone into it. Like several of my colleagues, I absolutely respect that, and I think people have done their best. To me, my difficulty is it brings with it huge risks of non-delivery in terms of the anticipated uplift in usage, first of all, and in terms of taking an optimistic scenario in terms of ongoing maintenance costs. And those are the two issues which I find really difficult to square. Now, clearly, beyond that too, it's not at this stage possible to bring in a professional commercial partner. We've not got a situation where there's a bid with an established leisure operator who says they could make a go of this. Instead, what we've got are some assertions, and I think I've in my own mind got huge doubts about whether they can be met. So, this is all about balancing things. It's all about judgment. And clearly, if our one objective as a council was keeping a much loved, valued facility in the place that it is, and where it enjoys passionate local support, and clearly with committed volunteers, then we would be able, I think, to endorse that and take the substantial risk, possibly an overwhelming risk of non-delivery. Looking at it in the round, I don't think we can do that, and so that's why I'll also be going with the catalyst bid.
So we're asked, in terms of the recommendations, to identify the commercial bid which best meets the council's policy objectives and the best value for money, which has been identified as the catalyst bid, and then to make a decision as whether to dispose of a site on that basis or to work with the CIC. Recommendation is to dispose of it to catalyst. Can I see those in favour, please? That's everyone. Okay, thank you very much. And we note that it will be going to scrutiny, and we'll organise that through scrutiny officers. Thank you very much.